Welcome back to Nighttime History. Today we will be exploring the world of the medieval carpenter's workshop, where skilled hands shaped wood into the structures and furnishings that defined daily life. Thank you for joining us tonight. Sit back and relax as we dive deep into the sounds, smells and rhythms of craftsmen who built the world, one carefully measured cut at a time. You step through the heavy wooden door of a carpenter's workshop in the heart of a bustling medieval town. The scent hits you first, that rich, clean smell of fresh wood shavings, mixed with the deeper aroma of aged timber. Listen as your footsteps echo against the packed earth floor, and watch as dust motes dance in the shafts of morning light streaming through small windows. This is where the magic of transformation happened daily, where rough logs became smooth planks, where planks became furniture, and where furniture became the foundation of comfortable living. The workshop surrounds you with the tools and materials of the carpenter's trade. Against one wall, you see long planks of oak, ash, and pine stacked in careful rows, each piece selected for specific qualities. The oak, dark and heavy, waits to become structural beams and high-quality furniture. The ash, lighter but strong, will form tool handles and cartwheels. The pine, easiest to work but less durable, serves for everyday items and practice pieces. You can smell the different woods, each with its own character. Oak carries an earthy, almost wine-like scent. Ash smells clean and sharp. Pine fills the air with its familiar resinous sweetness. You move closer to examine the tools that hang from pegs along the walls or rest on workbenches worn smooth by generations of use. The saws catch your attention first. Some are large, meant for rough work, with teeth as long as your thumbnail. Others are delicate, designed for fine detail work, their teeth barely visible. Each saw has been carefully maintained, filed sharp, and treated with oil to prevent rust. When carpenters drew these across wood, they created not just cuts but music, the rhythmic back and forth motion producing a steady whisper that could be heard throughout the workshop. Watch as you imagine the carpenter beginning his day's work. He would start by examining his timber, running his hands along the grain, feeling for knots, checking for splits or other flaws. His fingers, roughened by years of handling wooden tools, could detect imperfections that eyes might miss. He would plan his cuts carefully, marking measurements with a sharp knife rather than pencil, because knife marks lasted longer and showed up better against the wood's surface. The process of sawing timber was both art and science. Carpenters would secure their wood using various methods. Sometimes they used a sawhorse, a simple but effective support that held planks at a comfortable working height. For larger pieces, they might use saw pits, where one carpenter stood above the log and another below, working a long two-man saw between them. The man above, called the top sawyer, guided the cut and had the easier job. The man below, the pit sawyer, pulled the saw down through the wood while sawdust rained into his eyes and hair. You can almost hear the steady rhythm of the saw biting through wood fibre, feel the slight resistance as it encounters harder sections of grain, sense the satisfaction as it breaks through to complete each cut. Medieval carpenters developed remarkable skill in keeping their cuts straight and true without modern guides or power tools. They relied on careful eye measurement, steady hands, and years of experience that taught them exactly how much pressure to apply and how to maintain consistent motion. Once timber was cut to rough size, the real artistry began with planing. The plane, perhaps the most essential tool in any carpenter's collection, smoothed rough surfaces and created perfectly flat, even boards. Different planes served different purposes. Jack planes, medium-sized and versatile, handled most general smoothing work. Jointer planes, much longer, created the perfectly straight edges needed when joining boards together. Smoothing planes, smaller and more precise, put the final finish on visible surfaces. Using a plane required technique that took years to master. You would grip the tool firmly but not tensely, your body positioned to push it smoothly along the wood's length. The blade, set to take off just a thin shaving with each pass, would peel away curls of wood that fell to the floor like small wooden ribbons. The sound was distinctive, a clean slicing noise followed by the whisper of wood shaving against wood. Master carpenters could judge their work by sound alone, knowing from the plane's voice whether they were taking too much or too little material with each stroke. The workshop would accumulate these shavings throughout the day. Rather than waste them, carpenters found many uses for this byproduct of their craft. Shavings served as kindling for fires, bedding for animals, packing material for fragile items, and even rough cleaning cloths. Nothing in the medieval workshop went to waste if it could possibly serve another purpose. Joining beams and boards together required different techniques depending on the intended use and the stresses the joint would face. Carpenters developed dozens of different joints, each designed for specific situations. The simple butt joint, where two pieces of wood were placed end to end, worked for light-duty applications but needed reinforcement with nails, pegs or metal brackets. The lap joint, where one piece overlapped another, provided more surface area for adhesive and was stronger but used more material. For structural work, carpenters relied on more complex joints that could bear heavy loads without metal fasteners. The mortise and tenon joint, perhaps the most important in the carpenter's repertoire, involved cutting a rectangular hole, the mortise in one piece of wood, and shaping a matching projection, the tenon, on another piece. When fitted together and secured with wooden pegs, this joint could last for centuries. You can imagine the careful measuring required, the precise chiseling to create the mortise, the patient trimming of the tenon until it fit perfectly, snug but not so tight as to split the wood when assembled. Creating a mortise required multiple tools working together. First, the carpenter would mark out the exact dimensions using a marking gauge, a tool that scribed thin lines at precise distances from the wood's edge. Then he would use a mortise chisel, square and sturdy, to chop out the waste wood. This was rhythmic work, the chisel rising and falling, biting deeper into the wood with each stroke. The carpenter would work from both sides of the board when possible, meeting in the middle to avoid splintering the wood where the chisel broke through. Cutting the matching tenon required different techniques but equal precision. Using a tenon saw, designed with a rigid back to keep the blade perfectly straight, the carpenter would make careful cuts to remove material from all four sides of the wood's end, leaving behind a projection exactly sized to fit the mortise. Test fitting was crucial. The joint should go together with firm hand pressure but not require hammering, which might split the wood or create a loose connection as the wood dried and shrank. The workshop buzzed with activity as different projects progressed simultaneously. Apprentices might practice basic cuts on scrap wood, while journeymen worked on furniture pieces, and the master carpenter tackled complex structural joints for a new building. Each skill level had its place in the workshop's economy. Apprentices, usually young boys bound to the carpenter for 7 years, started with simple tasks like keeping tools sharp, sweeping up shavings, and learning to identify different types of wood. They watched constantly, absorbing techniques through observation before being trusted with tools. Journeymen, having completed their apprenticeships but not yet established their own workshops, performed much of the day-to-day production work. They had mastered basic techniques and could complete most projects without supervision, but they continued learning advanced methods and building the reputation that would eventually allow them to set up independently. The master carpenter oversaw everything, taking on the most challenging work, training apprentices, managing customer relationships, and ensuring the workshop's reputation for quality craftsmanship. Different types of projects required different approaches and skills. Furniture making demanded attention to appearance as well as function. Tables, chairs, chests and beds would be seen and used daily, so their surfaces needed to be smooth and attractive. Carpenters developed techniques for selecting wood with beautiful grain patterns, positioning pieces to show the wood to best advantage, and achieving finishes that highlighted the natural beauty of the material. Structural carpentry focused more on strength and durability than appearance. House frames, roof trusses and floor joists might never be seen once construction was complete, but they needed to bear loads safely for decades or centuries. These projects required different skills, including the ability to visualize complex three-dimensional structures and plan the sequence of assembly so that each piece could be fitted into place. The carpenter's workshop also produced countless everyday items that made medieval life more comfortable and efficient. Bowls, spoons, and other kitchen implements emerged from skilled hands that could shape wood into smooth, functional forms. Tool handles for other craftsmen required knowledge of how different woods behaved under stress and how to shape them for comfortable, secure grips. Cartwheels demanded precision in cutting curved pieces and assembling them to roll smoothly under heavy loads. Seasonal rhythms affected the workshop's activities throughout the year. Winter, when outdoor construction slowed, was ideal for indoor projects like furniture making. The carpenter could focus on detailed work, taking time to achieve perfect finishes without pressure to complete structural projects before weather turned bad. Spring brought a rush of building projects as people repaired winter damage and started new construction. Summer meant long working hours and focus on getting structures weathertight before the next winter. Fall was harvest time for the carpenter, as well as the farmer, as green timber was cut and stacked to dry for future use. Wood selection and preparation took considerable knowledge and planning ahead. Trees felled in winter, when sap was down, produced the most stable lumber. Different parts of the tree served different purposes. The straight, clear wood from the trunk's lower section became structural beams or high-quality furniture. Upper sections with more branches and knots might be split into shingles or used for less visible applications. Even branches found uses as tool handles or fuel for the workshop's fire. Drying timber properly was crucial for successful carpentry. Green wood, fresh from the tree, contained too much moisture for most applications. As it dried, it would shrink, warp, and crack in unpredictable ways. Experienced carpenters learned to stack lumber with spacers between boards to allow air circulation, protect it from direct sunlight and rain, and wait months or years for it to reach the proper moisture content. They could judge readiness by the wood's weight, colour, and the sound it made when struck with a hammer. Let's stop here for a moment and take a breath in this peaceful workshop setting. If you're enjoying this journey into the carpenter's world, consider joining our community of nighttime travellers by subscribing and turning on notifications to support our channel. Make sure to like this video to help us reach more people who might enjoy these quiet historical explorations. Let us know in the comments where you're settling in to sleep tonight, and what time it is in your part of the world. We love hearing from listeners around the globe who share these nighttime moments with us. The tools themselves tell stories of innovation and tradition passed down through generations. Each tool evolved to solve specific problems that carpenters faced in their daily work. The drawk knife, with handles at both ends of a curved blade, allowed precise shaping of curved surfaces like chair legs or barrel staves. The carpenter would pull it toward himself, controlling the cut with subtle changes in angle and pressure. Spokes halves, smaller versions of the same principle, refined curves and smoothed irregular surfaces that planes couldn't reach. Measuring tools ensured accuracy in an age before standardized units. The carpenter's rule, usually made of wood or bone, bore markings that might be unique to a particular workshop or region. More important than absolute measurements was consistency within a project. A chair needed all four legs the same length, regardless of whether they were exactly 18 inches or some other measurement. Calipers helped transfer measurements from one piece to another, while squares ensured that joints met at proper angles. Chisels came in many varieties, each designed for specific tasks. Paring chisels with thin blades and sharp edges trimmed joints to perfect fits. Mortise chisels, thick and sturdy, could withstand the hammering required to chop deep holes. 4. Carving chisels, available in dozens of profiles, shaped decorative elements and sculptural details. Maintaining these tools required daily attention. Each evening, the careful carpenter would clean his chisels, check their edges, and touch up any that had dulled during the day's work. The workbench served as the carpenter's primary work surface and tool storage system. Heavy and stable, it provided a solid foundation for precise work. Dog holes, round openings across the bench's surface, accepted pegs that could hold workpieces securely. A face vise mounted on the front edge gripped boards for edge planing or detail work. The bench's design reflected centuries of refinement, each feature serving multiple purposes and contributing to the carpenter's ability to work efficiently and accurately. Storage and organisation in the workshop followed practical principles developed over generations. Tools hung on walls where they were visible and easily accessible. Lumber was sorted by type, size and quality, with the best pieces protected from moisture and damage. Hardware like nails, screws and hinges lived in labelled boxes or drawers. A well-organised workshop allowed the carpenter to focus on craftsmanship rather than searching for misplaced tools or materials. The relationship between carpenters and other craftsmen created networks of mutual support and specialisation. Blacksmiths made and repaired the carpenter's metal tools. Tanners provided leather for tool handles and protective aprons. Merchants supplied exotic woods and imported hardware. In return, carpenters built workshops, homes and furniture for their fellow craftsmen, creating a web of interdependence that strengthened the entire community. Training the next generation remained one of the master carpenter's most important responsibilities. Apprenticeship contracts, often lasting 7 years, detailed the obligations of both master and student. The master provided food, shelter, clothing and training in exchange for the apprentice's labour and loyalty. Early years focused on basic skills and workshop maintenance. Advanced apprentices took on increasingly complex projects under supervision, gradually building the expertise they would need as independent craftsmen. The workshop's daily rhythm followed natural patterns of light and energy. Dawn brought preparation, sharpening tools, and planning the day's work. Morning hours, when minds were fresh and light was good, were ideal for precise work requiring concentration. Afternoon might see rougher tasks like sawing timber or moving materials. Evening brought cleanup, tool maintenance, and planning for tomorrow's activities. Seasonal celebrations and religious observances punctuated the workshop's calendar. Feast days meant rest from labor and time for community gathering. Harvest festivals celebrated the fruits of all craftsmen's work. Winter solstice marked the gradual return of longer days that would make precise work easier. These rhythms connected the carpenter's work to the larger patterns of medieval life, reminding craftsmen that their skills served not just individual customers, but their entire community's well-being. The carpenter's workshop was more than just a place of business. It was a center of learning, a hub of community activity, and a repository of knowledge passed down through generations. Here, raw materials became useful objects through the application of skill, patience, and deep understanding of wood's properties and possibilities. You continue deeper into the workshop's daily operations, watching as the carpenter approaches the delicate art of joinery with practiced precision. Listen as he selects his marking knife, feeling its weight in his palm before scoring clean lines across the timber's surface. The blade whispers against the wood grain, leaving marks that will guide his cuts with mathematical accuracy. You observe how he checks each measurement twice, running his fingers along the scored lines, because in this world of handcrafted precision, mistakes in marking mean wasted materials and lost time. The dovetail joint captures your attention as you witness one of carpentry's most elegant solutions to connecting wood. Watch the carpenter lay out the distinctive triangular pins on the board's end, spacing them evenly with an eye trained by years of practice. His hands move with quiet confidence as he adjusts the angles slightly, knowing that dovetails cut too steep will be fragile, while those cut too shallow will pull apart under stress. The proper angle, learned through countless repetitions, creates joints that actually grow stronger under load. You hear the gentle tapping of a small hammer as he uses a dovetail saw to make the initial cuts. This saw, designed specifically for precise joint work, produces a distinctive high-pitched whisper as its fine teeth slice through wood fibers. Each stroke follows exactly along his marked lines, the blade held perfectly vertical to ensure clean, square cuts. Between cuts, he pauses to clear away small shavings that might deflect the saw from its intended path. The process continues as you watch him remove the waste wood between the dovetail pins using a narrow chisel and small hammer. Each tap resonates through the workshop, creating a rhythm that speaks of patience and methodical progress. The chisel bites into the wood at precisely the right angle, removing material in controlled chips rather than random splinters. You can sense his satisfaction as each piece of waste falls away, revealing the clean triangular shapes that will interlock with their matching sockets. Creating the corresponding dovetail sockets requires equal skill but different techniques. You observe as the carpenter positions the completed pins against the mating board, using them as a template to mark exactly where each socket must be cut. His marking knife traces around each pin, creating guidelines that eliminate guesswork from the process. The precision required here demands steady hands and sharp eyes, because even tiny errors will result in joints that fit poorly or not at all. The workshop's atmosphere changes as different craftsmen work on various projects simultaneously. You move between workstations, observing how each carpenter adapts common techniques to specific challenges. Near the window, where light is best, an elderly craftsman carves decorative elements for a church commission. His gouges and carving chisels shape flowing patterns in the oak, each cut removing just a few wood fibers as the design gradually emerges from the rough blank. You notice how carving requires entirely different body mechanics than structural carpentry. Instead of the full body movements used for sawing and planing, carving demands finger control and wrist flexibility. The carver's hands work in small, precise motions, constantly rotating the workpiece to maintain the proper angle between tool and wood. His breathing synchronizes with his cutting rhythm, each exhale accompanying a careful slice that adds definition to leaves, vines, or geometric patterns. The scent of different woods becomes more apparent as you spend time in the workshop. Each species releases its own aromatic signature when cut, planed, or carved. Cherry produces a sweet, almost fruity fragrance that mingles pleasantly with the sharper scent of freshly cut maple. Walnut adds its own distinctive earthiness to the mix, while cedar contributes its familiar, moth-repelling fragrance. These natural perfumes create an olfactory map of the carpenter's current projects, telling stories of furniture, structures, and decorative elements in various stages of completion. Furniture construction reveals the carpenter's understanding of wood movement and structural engineering. You watch as a craftsman assembles a chest, carefully orienting each board so that all pieces will expand and contract in harmony with seasonal moisture changes. The grain direction of each component has been planned to minimize warping and splitting as the wood responds to humidity variations throughout the years. The chest's construction demonstrates multiple joinery techniques working together. The main panels connect with traditional plank and batten joints, where narrower strips cover the seams between wider boards. This approach allows the main panels to move naturally while keeping the joints weather-tight. Corner joints employ through dovetails that will be visible in the finished piece, their triangular shapes creating both structural strength and decorative appeal. You observe the careful installation of the chest's hinges, hand-forged by the local blacksmith to the carpenter's specifications. Each hinge leaf must be recessed exactly into the wood so that the chest lid closes flush and tight. The carpenter uses a sharp knife to score around the hinge outline, then removes material with a narrow chisel, checking frequently to ensure uniform depth across the entire recess. The lid's construction requires special attention to prevent warping and binding. Watch as the carpenter slicks boards with complementary grain patterns, arranging them so their natural tendency to cup will work against each other rather than creating a pronounced curve. He reinforces the lid with cleats running perpendicular to the main boards, using sliding dovetail joints that allow seasonal movement while maintaining structural integrity. Tool maintenance occupies a significant portion of each craftsman's time and attention. You witness the daily ritual of sharpening as each carpenter tends to his edge tools with the devotion of a musician tuning his instrument. Chisels, plane irons, and knife blades receive careful attention on whetstones of varying grits, progressing from coarse stones that reshape damaged edges to fine stones that create the mirror polish essential for clean cuts. The sharpening process reveals the intimate relationship between craftsman and tool. Each carpenter knows the exact angle required for different tools and can maintain it by feel alone, developed through thousands of repetitions. The rhythm of blade against stone creates a distinctive scraping sound that changes pitch as the edge becomes sharper. Experienced ears can judge sharpening progress by sound alone, knowing when to move to the next finer grit or when the edge has reached optimal sharpness. You watch as a plane iron receives this careful attention. The carpenter holds it at a precise angle against the stone, moving it in steady strokes that cover the entire edge evenly. Periodically, he stops to examine his progress, feeling the edge with his thumb to detect any nicks or irregular spots that need additional work. The final polishing creates an edge so sharp it can slice through paper or shave hair from the back of his hand. Wood preparation reveals another dimension of the carpenter's expertise. You observe as seasoned timber is examined, sorted, and prepared for specific projects. Each board receives individual attention as the craftsman reads its grain patterns, looking for areas of strength and potential weakness. Knots, grain deviation, and growth irregularities all influence how a particular piece can best be used. The process of resawing, splitting thick planks into thinner boards, demonstrates remarkable skill with basic tools. Using a large frame saw, the carpenter guides his blade along a carefully marked line, maintaining perfect alignment through the board's entire thickness. This technique allows him to create matched panels from single thick planks, preserving continuous grain patterns that would be impossible to achieve any other way. Specialized furniture projects require unique approaches and techniques. You watch as a carpenter begins work on a turned chair, a complex piece requiring both traditional joinery and specialized shaping skills. The seat, carved from a single thick plank, demands careful removal of material to create the comfortable curved surface that will cradle the sitter while maintaining structural strength around the leg joints. Each chair leg starts as a square blank that will be shaped using draw knives and spoke shaves. The carpenter marks out the final round dimensions, then begins the gradual process of removing material to approach the finished form. His draw knife peels away long shavings, reducing the square blank toward round, while spoke shaves smooth and refine the curves, creating the subtle swells and narrowing that give the legs their elegant proportions. The workshop's seasonal rhythms become apparent as you observe changing activities throughout the year. Winter projects focus on indoor work that can be accomplished in limited daylight. Complex joinery, detailed carving, and finish work dominate these shorter days. The workshop's brazier provides warmth and light, while craftsmen take advantage of the slower pace to experiment with new techniques and train apprentices in advanced skills. Spring brings a shift toward outdoor projects and structural work. You notice the increased activity as customers arrive to discuss building projects, repair work, and custom furniture orders. The carpenter's attention turns to estimating materials, planning work schedules, and coordinating with other tradesmen who will contribute to larger projects. The workshop becomes a planning centre as well as a production facility. The apprentice's progression from helper to skilled craftsman unfolds before you over months and years of observation. You witness the gradual development of hand skills, eye judgment, and material understanding that transform eager beginners into competent workers. Early mistakes become learning opportunities, while small successes build confidence and motivation to tackle increasingly challenging tasks. Advanced apprentices take on projects that demonstrate their growing expertise. You watch as a senior apprentice undertakes his first independent furniture project, a simple stool that requires accurate joinery, proper proportions, and acceptable finish quality. His movements still lack the fluid efficiency of the master carpenter, but his careful attention to each step produces work that meets the workshop standards. The business aspects of the carpenter's workshop reveal the economic relationships that sustain medieval craftsmanship. You observe negotiations with customers who commission custom work, watching as the carpenter evaluates requirements, estimates costs, and establishes delivery schedules. His reputation depends on delivering promised quality within agreed timeframes, making project management as important as technical skills. Payment often involves bartering goods and services rather than cash transactions. You witness exchanges where carpentry work trades for grain, meat, cloth, or services from other craftsmen. These relationships create community networks where each tradesman's skills support others, building economic resilience through diversified interdependence rather than monetary speculation. The workshop's role as a teaching institution extends beyond formal apprenticeships. Local farmers bring broken tools for repair, learning maintenance techniques while watching the carpenter's methods. Neighbouring craftsmen stop by to discuss technical problems or share information about new techniques and materials. This informal knowledge exchange strengthens the entire community's technical capabilities. Quality control in the medieval workshop relies on the master carpenter's experienced eye and the community's expectations. You observe the careful inspection that each completed piece receives before leaving the workshop. Joints are tested for tightness, surfaces examined for smoothness, and overall construction evaluated for durability. Work that fails to meet standards is corrected or remade, because reputation represents the workshop's most valuable asset. The integration of artistic and functional elements becomes apparent as you examine finished pieces. Even utilitarian items, like work tables and storage chests, receive decorative touches that elevate them beyond mere functionality. Simple chamfers soften hard edges, while carefully proportioned elements create visual harmony that pleases the eye while serving practical needs. Complex architectural projects require collaboration with other building trades. You witness planning sessions where carpenters, masons and thatchers coordinate their work to ensure proper integration of different building systems. The carpenter's timber frame must accommodate the mason's foundation and wall systems, while providing proper support for the thatcher's roof structure. The workshop's tool collection represents generations of accumulated knowledge embodied in iron and wood. Each tool evolved to solve specific problems, and master craftsmen often modify or create specialized tools for particular techniques. You observe the ongoing process of tool improvement as craftsmen experiment with handle shapes, blade angles, and other modifications that enhance performance or comfort. Waste reduction in the medieval workshop demonstrates practical environmental consciousness born from economic necessity. Every scrap of wood finds some use, from shavings for kindling to small offcuts for pegs and patches. Broken tools are repaired rather than discarded, and worn-out handles are replaced rather than throwing away the entire tool. Nothing with potential value is casually discarded. The workshop's evening activities create their own peaceful rhythm as daylight fades. You watch as work areas are cleaned, tools are put away, and tomorrow's projects are planned. The day's accomplishments are evaluated, problems are noted for resolution, and materials are prepared for the next day's work. This daily transition from active production to quiet preparation maintains the workshop's rhythm and ensures continued productivity. The relationship between master craftsmen and their community extends beyond simple commerce into civic responsibility. Experienced carpenters often serve as technical advisors for community projects like bridge building, church construction, or fortification repair. Their expertise in structural engineering and material properties makes them valuable resources for projects that exceed individual workshops' capabilities. Advanced joinery techniques demonstrate the full extent of the carpenter's geometric and engineering knowledge. You observe the layout and cutting of complex roof joints, where multiple timbers intersect at various angles, each requiring precise cuts that must fit perfectly when the structure is assembled. These joints demand spatial visualization abilities and mathematical understanding that rival any contemporary engineering education. The workshop's acoustic environment tells its own story of productive activity. Each tool creates distinctive sounds that experienced ears can interpret from across the room. The whisper of a plane taking fine shavings differs noticeably from the coarser noise of rough surfacing. Saw sounds vary with blade type, wood species, and cutting direction. Hammer blows on chisels create different tones depending on the wood being cut and the chisel's sharpness. Seasonal wood movement requires ongoing attention even in finished pieces. You observe as the carpenter adjusts a cabinet door whose fit has changed with seasonal humidity variations, trimming a small amount from edges that have swollen or adding thin strips where shrinkage has created gaps. This ongoing relationship between craftsman and completed work reflects the living nature of wood as a building material. The workshop's role in preserving and transmitting technical knowledge becomes apparent as you observe the informal teaching that occurs throughout each day. Experienced craftsmen share tips and techniques while working, explaining the reasoning behind particular approaches or warning about common mistakes. This continuous knowledge transfer ensures that hard-won expertise passes to the next generation rather than dying with individual craftsmen. Thank you. If you enjoyed our work and are still awake, check out our other medieval content. And if you've fallen asleep, please relax and enjoy the rain.